Hey guys, it's Hart breaking down this 11 game NBA slate here on DraftKings, talking through some of my favorite early look core plays based on the news we have so far. So if you guys hit that like button, do greatly appreciate it. Now let's get into the slate breakdown. Before getting into the breakdown, I just want to recap Sunday. Entered in a small little NBA contest because the games were pretty early. Didn't really feel like playing that much at all. So, I was able to get my money back. Nothing special there. Football side, I mean, Miles Sanders really gets injured in the first play. Misses a few rotations, first few rotations there for the Eagles. And I mean, he had like negative 0.25 points in the first half. Like, really? And then did absolutely nothing. It was just super frustrating. I had Goddard, would have easily cashed there in the big $1 million in first place. No one's, I think a decent amount of people split. Yeah, good amount of people split. Still got 52,000 if you took home. So yeah, that lineup wasn't the best, but then I entered another lineup where it was pretty close to the optimal lineup. It was, I think, 9 points away? Yeah, 9 points away. Got 133. The winning lineup obviously was 142.12. So not too far away. Was able to win some money back there. But yeah, NFL season's over, unfortunately. So it's going to be the NBA rest of the season, which I'm super pumped, super excited about because NBA playoffs are fantastic. Can't wait for that. But this is going to be more of a pretty quick breakdown, just kind of highlighting some of my favorite plays, some of my core plays. I'll update a few more core plays on the right here once we go through the games. But yeah, starting off with this quick breakdown, Atlanta and Charlotte. The big news here is obviously Trae Young. If he's out, we're going to want to look to a DeJounte Murray. Those secondary options of like a Sadiq Bey, who should probably start if Collins and Bogdan are going to be out. If they're in, then Bey will come off the bench. He'll just hurt the upside of guys like Bogdan, Collins, Hunter. So there really won't be any standout plays here for me. Capella's an interesting secondary option, but it really comes down to Trae Young if he's in or out. Then we look to DeJounte Murray. On to Charlotte, a team just more secondary options who look pretty solid. PJ at his price tag. Hayward's a very solid value play there, seeing 30+ minutes. But my real interest is going to be Melo Ball there at 10-4 and Mark Williams at 4,000. You can always go to Nick Richards here at 3,600. He's a decent pivot option off a usually pretty chalky Mark Williams. Moving on to San Antonio and Cleveland. San Antonio, Keldon should be good to go. Sohan should be good to go. So I'm assuming they'll start Sohan, Branham, Johnson, Bates, Diop, and Collins most likely. So let's keep an eye out on that. With that starting lineup, I think they're all viable. I'd prefer getting to a Sohan or a Branham. They should be more aggressive now that they're officially tanking. Collins is there, but it's not the best matchup. And Bates Diop is a decent value play at 4,300. So obviously it's not the best matchup, but they're going to have to play, and those guys will play a good amount. So they do have some upside. Cleveland side, not a lot of interest for me, just more secondary options. You just really hope this game stays close. If you do, then these these plays would be very solid contrarian plays like a Donovan Mitchell. He'd probably be my favorite. And then maybe a Jarrett Allen there at 6,800. But that's really it for me. Moving on to Utah and Indiana. Utah side, Laurie is always a very solid contrarian spin up option at 9,100. He's usually super, super low owned. Clarkson's back. He should be aggressive. Should see, high 30s minutes, close to 40. He'll shoot the ball a ton. So I don't mind him there. He looks decent. A good game environment here versus Indiana. I think Walker Kessler still stands out as the best play. Him and Colin Sexton at 5,200. Walker Kessler. Usually, there's a little bit games where he's just not aggressive, as we saw last game. Only 3 shots in 35 minutes, but he still got you almost 28 fantasy points because he's just great at rebounding and getting blocks. So I think he's still very viable there at 5,600. Sexton's still very viable, even with Jordan Clarkson back. You should probably start. He's going to play 30+ minutes. He's scoring dependent times, but he did foul out, so that did hurt his upside there. So I like him here to go for at least 30, close to 30 fantasy points at 5,200. I think that's still very, very solid. Linux there. Horton Tucker, people will probably chase that. I don't expect him to be this productive, especially with Jordan Clarkson back. Horton Tucker will shoot some shots. I think he looks decent. I'm expecting maybe 20, 25 fantasy points at 3,900. That's obviously very solid. It just comes down to ownership for me there. But yeah, he's definitely worth a look and a mention. On Indiana, it really just comes down to Halliburton and Turner. If both of them are in, I do like both of them a good amount. If both of them or one of them are out, then for Turner, we're going to look to Isaiah Jackson or maybe Daniel Tice. If they start, maybe they throw Jalen Smith in there. We'll have to wait and see. But they got some options to rotate in there. I'd have a good amount of interest in that backup, whoever starts. If Halliburton's out, then we're going to look to TJ McConnell. He'd be a great player at 5,000. Duarte would probably get mid-20s minutes. Nemhard would be a great value play, 3,700. It'd be more minutes for a guy like Matherin as well, who should be super aggressive off the bench. I'd like Indiana a good amount if Halliburton and Turner, one of them, is going to be out. Moving on to Houston and Philly. Not a lot of interest for me on the Houston side. Obviously, if Sengun Green should lead the team. I prefer getting to Green because of his price tag, but you just really hope this game stays close. If it blows out, obviously none of these guys are going to get there. Maybe some of these value plays, you can take a shot on Tyree Easton if you think he's going to, get some more run just because of a blowout, but really no interest from me besides kind of the main two guys if you want to get super risky. Philly side, it's the same thing. Great matchup here for Joel. Great matchup for Harden. You just really hope they get fourth quarter to run if this game stays close. Harris, Maxey, Melton are all interesting secondary options that are pretty cheap. But once again, this offense is just run through Harden and Embiid, so it's hard to get to those other pieces. Moving on to Denver and Miami. Denver, Jokic, 12K. He looks great if Murray or Gordon are going to be out. If one or both of them will be, Jokic, I'd say load up on him. If one of them are in or both of them in, I really just prefer getting to maybe Murray if he's going to be playing and not on the minutes limit. But let's say one of or both of them are out. It's just a bump for MPJ. He's score independent, but he's viable. I'd like Bruce Brown a lot more, even though he hasn't been great in these spot starts for Jamal Murray. But he'd still be very viable there at 5,300. KCP would be a very, very solid value play there at 4,400. Score independent, but he should be playing big minutes. And then Concar would probably start again, 3,700. He'd play mid-20s. He'd be solid value play. Same with Christian Brown. He'd play mid-20s. He'd be an okay value play. So that's kind of the pivots there. And I will mention Ish Smith did get the backup point guard run with Jamal Murray out. Played 21, did not shoot the ball well, but he was still pretty productive when he's out there. So you always take a look at that if Jamal's out once again. Now Miami's the frustrating team because Bam's probable, Jimmy's good to go, but now Tyler Hero is questionable with the back injury. They're already pretty short-handed with Victor out, Lowry's still out, Vincent's questionable, Strus is questionable. Looks like he's good to go. I think Vincent's good to go as well. So the big news is obviously that Tyler Hero, if he's out, they'll probably start, I'm assuming, Max Strus. And if they do that at 3,800, I think he's a great value play there at 3,800. Jimmy, Bam would look even better. I prefer getting to Jimmy at 8,500. He'd have to shoulder more of the offensive load. Gabe Vincent still a great value play, 4,500. So a good amount of interest in this Miami side. Just comes down to if Hero's in or out. If Hero's in, I prefer still getting to Hero just because it's a price tag, but it really comes down to if he's in or out. Brooklyn and New York Knicks. Brooklyn side, this is just a very interesting team. They're super, super good at defense, and I think they'll be pretty solid to either hold on to their spot or maybe drop down one or two playoff spots. But yeah, this team is looking very, very solid. They just played a great game against Philadelphia. They almost won. I don't think anyone kind of expected that when it's pretty much just a team full of wings. But for this breakdown, not a lot stands out to me. I think Claxton's always going to be a solid play. He should see, mid-30s minutes. He just kind of got in foul trouble versus Embiid there in that game. But they do have a lot of people to rotate through, so that's why I don't have a lot of interest. Like, Mikal Bridges should be playing solid minutes. He's a decent option, 6'6", but they just have a lot of guys to throw out there. It'd probably be Claxton and Bridges and Cam Johnson for me at 4,900. We know he's scoring independence, but he should see maybe 30-ish minutes. He can be productive if he's hitting the shots. But yeah, they just have a lot of guys to rotate through now. Joe Harris had a solid game there, shooting the ball, but not a lot of interest in terms of DFS. On the Knicks side, it's interesting to see because it's like Brooklyn is very great at defense now. It was only one game sample with those guys being traded and finally playing that first game. So it'll be interesting to see how the Knicks kind of handle that defense with pretty much 1 through 5 being able to switch off on all of these guys. So it might be a very ugly, gross game. And for that reason, not a lot of interest. If I was going to get to people, I'd say, Grimes is a decent value play. His minutes were down. They do have Josh Hart there, so I do think that really hurts the value plays of a Grimes. Quickly looks okay. He's there, but I still just prefer getting to Randall, Brunson, and Barrett. My interest probably would be Randall there at 10-1. It doesn't really matter the matchup. He's going to be super aggressive, so I think he'd be my favorite play there. Moving on to the last few games here, Orlando and Chicago. Orlando side, standouts for me are going to be Wendell Carter, Fultz, and Paolo. In terms of value, you can always take a shot on Suggs and Cole Anthony, but the minutes aren't always a guarantee. On the Chicago side, Vooch looks pretty solid. I do like DeRozan a good amount, 8,300. He hasn't been great recently, hasn't been aggressive, hasn't gotten more than 20 points in the past 6 games besides one time there versus Portland. So I do like DeMar to get back into the swing of things here. versus Orlando, so I like him a good amount. In terms of value, you could look to Drummond, you could look to Kobe White, but that's really it. It's not a lot of interest in Chicago as of right now. Moving on to the Pelicans here. I like Ingram. His price is still too low for his role. Should be playing mid-30s minutes. He's been great at getting assists, great at rebounding, great at scoring. So I do like him once again here in a great matchup against OKC. CJ is questionable, but he should be good to go. If he's out, obviously we want to look to a guy like, where'd he go? Jose Alvarado to start there, 3,200. He'd be very, very solid. And then you could take a shot on guys like a Trey Murphy, who should be more aggressive offensively. I do like J-Val a good amount as well here. Great matchup. Obviously, the minutes are always a question mark. It just, if he can stay in the game, play close to 30 minutes, I think he looks very, very solid there as a nice GPP play at 5,800. So a good amount of interest in the Pelican side. OKC side, not a lot of interest. Everyone's kind of priced about right. Lou Dort, maybe interested in him if he's not on minutes limit, but otherwise, not a lot of interest besides maybe whoever they start at center. JRE is back, but if he's on a minutes limit, I don't think there's a need to get to him. Sarich is there. Maybe they start him. So maybe a little bit interest in whoever they start at center, but otherwise, everyone's just more secondary options. Moving on to Minnesota. And it's a decent play there. Gobert's questionable. Anderson's questionable. If one of them or both of them are in, I don't mind them as like contrarian options. I think Anderson would have the most interest for me. If both of them are out, then we're going to look to Naz Reid to fill in the center role. Then we can look to McDaniels to fill in kind of for Kyle Anderson. But yeah, not a lot of interest. They did pick up Mike Conley, who ended up playing 26 minutes. They picked up Alexander Walker and McLaughlin's back. So there's a lot of guards to go around. So I don't really like the guards a lot. I will mention Prince. Maybe he starts in place of Kyle Anderson. He looks like an okay value if he does play. So a little bit of interest, not huge. Huge injury news there unless it comes down to Gobert. On the Dallas side, Luka is back. He played 41 minutes. Still kind of the same Luka. His upside was hurt a little bit more just because he was passing the ball around more. Kyrie obviously did pretty solid, but it's really just going to be Luka and Kyrie for me. Any interest in the rest of the team? Not really. Moving on to Washington and Golden State. Obviously, great matchup here. Porzingis looks very, very solid as a spin-up play. Kuzma is questionable. If he's in, obviously, it really hurts the upside of Beal and Porzingis. Really have no interest in anyone else. If he's out, I think Beal looks okay. Denny's there. Gafford's there. Not a lot of standouts. Morris, maybe, but that's really it. It's really just going to be Porzingis for me. Golden State, Steph's still obviously out. Clay looks solid. Poole looks too cheap there at 7,800. Green looks decent. Wiggins is questionable if he's out. Just more minutes for a guy like DiVincenzo would be a very solid value play. Looney should have to play decent minutes. Only 2 points, but still got almost 30 fantasy points there, 23 minutes. So I like Looney a good amount as a value play at 4,200. And then maybe it's just more minutes for a guy like Kuminga who should maybe see 20-ish minutes if Wiggins is going to be out. So not a lot of interest besides kind of the main pieces for Golden State. And then moving on to the Lakers in Portland here. Lakers side, LeBron is still questionable with that ankle injury, so it looks like it might be Anthony Davis's team once again here. I would love him here in this matchup against Portland. I know he's coming off of some disappointing games there. 13 against OKC, only 23 against Milwaukee, then 13 against Golden State. So I expect them to have a huge, huge game here if they're good to go. With LeBron being out, Anthony Davis, he looks great. Russell becomes more viable. He saw 35 minutes. He was, decently aggressive. Schroeder's there at 5,500. Don't love him. I really just prefer getting to Anthony Davis still. And then in terms of the secondary options, sure, you can land on these guys, but if LeBron's in, there's no interest. Vanderbilt was productive in 17 minutes. Don't know if I can trust that, but he'd probably be maybe my favorite dart throw on this team here if there's no LeBron. But that's really it. It's really hard to trust anyone besides Anthony Davis there at his price tag, 10.6. So right now I'm going to throw him in there because I don't think LeBron will be good to go. Why isn't so just gonna throw LaMelo back in there. And then moving on to Portland. On the Portland side, it's pretty much just been Dame. Grant is questionable with that concussion-like symptoms. If he's out, I'm assuming they'll start Nasir Little or Shaedon Sharpe. I prefer getting into Little just because Sharpe's a little bit more score independent. But yeah, there should be some very solid value. Thibault and Knox are potentially going to be able to play. They have Cam Reddish as well, who did start, played 17 minutes. He was okay. So it really comes down to who they start at the small forward and power forward position for this game here. That'd be my favorite plays on the Portland side. You could always get to Dame and Simons, but it's really just going to be those two guys for me, whoever starts at small forward and power forward. So that is the slate breakdown. Pretty quick one. Here's just my core value plays, my early look core plays as of right now. Sexton, Ingram, Mark Williams, Ball, and Anthony Davis. Obviously, there is some injury news we have to wait on, like the Miami situation there, like the Minnesota situation, the Pelican situation with CJ. So there's a good amount of injury news, but yeah, that's kind of the early core plays for me. If you guys like the video, hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.